welcome back. It's that time when I take a trip down down to Miami-Dade this week for a candidate who is running for mayor of Miami-Dade County. Now, I thought it's Shlomo Danzinger is the gentleman I'm speaking with. I thought you were mayor of Surfside. Did I miss something?
Hi, Joyce. I was the mayor of Surfside for the last couple of years.
Right.
That term ended back in March, yeah.
Oh, okay. The term ended. And so now you decided to go for the big job, the mayor of Miami-Dade. How many people are in this race? I looked it up yesterday, and it's like there's a whole bunch of you in there.
So I believe there's about 7 candidates. Now, none of us have actually qualified at this time. Qualifications are going to be held at the end of the month, so we'll see who survives that round, I guess.
Okay. And it's not the same as it is here in Broward with the Broward County mayor, where basically they just recycle commission or city council members. You guys actually are democratically electing a mayor.
Yeah, so it's a separate position which is elected democratically, but, we've seen commissioners step into that role after their term expired as county commission.
Mm-hmm. So why take on this challenge? You're a young man. You'll be the first Orthodox Jewish mayor, I presume, right?
I believe so. First of all, thank you for calling me young. I appreciate that.
Compared to me, you're young.
As my role, my role as mayor here in Surfside, it was necessary for me to interact with the county, to work with the mayor on a variety of projects that required that coordination. The way we're set up with home rule, but even through the United States, we have our federal government, our state, and then it breaks down to municipal, to county and municipal. So, through that experience, myself and many other local leaders, this highlighted a lot of the deficiencies in the collaboration that the cities need to have with our county. It also opened my eyes to policies being pushed by the current mayor that are detrimental to our county. We're seeing similar policies here from this administration that closely resemble those that were implemented in cities like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Chicago, which are now shadows, of their once great cities that they were. So there's a need for real leadership here in Miami-Dade County, leadership that will work with their governor, with our state counterparts to protect the county. We need to get back to the real work of government, which is utilizing our taxes to provide services for the residents, build up our infrastructure, support residents and businesses so that we as Miami-Dade County residents can thrive. We're not seeing a lot of that, unfortunately, so I put myself in the race to try to bring that to our county on a much bigger level.
Now, I believe Mayor Cava is a Democrat, right? But it looks like most of the candidates who are challenging are now Republicans. Is that correct?
Yeah. So first of all, I think the county mayor race is still like one of the last positions that you're officially running nonpartisan.
Right.
We have a sheriff now for the first time that is going to be running in our history of Miami-Dade. But of course, the media do a good job at separating the Republican candidates from Democrats.
Right.
But I think we've seen the numbers. Looking at the last race, which was 4 years ago, we had the current Hialeah mayor, Mayor Bovo, was running. He beat Cava in the primary and lost to her in a runoff by just a few votes. Now, fast forward 4 years later, in the last 2 years, we've seen a dramatic shift in our county. Aside from local leaders, we're seeing Republican county commissioners being elected. We're seeing Republican senators, state representatives, all being elected within Miami-Dade County. We saw, DeSantis took a very strong win down here. And the hope is that this county can finally join the rest of the state and start pumping out some normal policies.
Well, from what I can see, she's not a popular mayor. I mean, I've looked up a couple of different articles about her, and it's hard to find anybody saying anything good about her. She asks for too much money, and she's constantly in the political arena. Even though you say it's a nonpartisan position, you would never know that by all of the fundraisers that she attends.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I mean, this mayor has raised, combined with the PAC that she's working with, over $14 million. You have to ask yourself why you need that kind of money. She's in bed and aligned with, more of the federal government, the Biden administration, while at the same time kind of distancing our county from the state. I believe the state contributes to like 2% of the county's budget, and while the federal government is 6%. So when you look at which policies need to be pushed and who we're aligned with, there's a lot of missing opportunities when you don't want to work with our state counterparts, when you're not taking the revenue that the state is offering, because you're overtly criticizing the state. So we as the residents kind of lose in these situations.
Now, let me ask you, because, I mean, there are a couple of issues to me that are very important in any race, but in particular in this race. I probably received 500 emails about the lease on the Seaquarium. I don't remember that many emails about any subject since the Save Our Shores, the SOS, when the Cuban migrants were coming across the waters and landing in Miami-Dade. I've never received this many emails, and that was 30 years ago. So what's going on with that? Where do you stand, and is that still problematic?
With the sea, I mean, I don't know why people are focusing on the Seaquarium when the county seems to have much bigger issues.
Oh, I agree with you.
She's been called out on some of the bigger things, which has made her unpopular even with her own party. Is her proposed $2.5 billion bond, of which $1.5 billion is being allocated for building homes for the homeless, and this increases taxes for all the residents of Miami-Dade County. We have big issues down here with our home insurance. We're struggling to maintain that raising rates down here, and I know the CFO is working hard to implement different policy changes that will help alleviate that for us. But at the same time, that's still a real struggle. Inflation is a real struggle. And we seem to be focused on aquariums and, the Bay when many of us are losing our houses.
An interesting point. But again, my measure of what are the issues that are important to voters is sometimes based on just how many people will reach out on a certain subject. Now, I also know that they use these bots and they sent out some crazy email that encouraged people to just forward it to every radio program. So I'm not naive about that, but it does seem as though they've been able to shift attention away from that bond to something like, the PETA's protests outside of her house. And as long as that stays a focus, and you're seeing it in the Herald and the Sun Sentinel and on the nightly news stations, nobody is talking about the money. And nobody is talking about insurance. What is the format that you guys are going to use? Are you going to have debates? How are we going to hear these subjects?
So what I've seen in the past, a lot of networks will set up these debates. But as you mentioned, the media is doing everything they can to hide these deficiencies. I'm watching the Herald, and she has it on her own webpage, proudly touting the amount of money that she's raised and who's donated. And there's a Herald article on her own page which highlights that, the Brightline is a big contributor, that Nomi Health are big contributors. All of these companies and corporations receive multi-million dollar, tens of millions of dollars worth of contracts from the county afterwards. There's the pay-to-play, there's corruption going on here overtly, and the media does everything they can do to hide it. I watched an article get printed by Florida Politico, and I was working on it because I put it onto my own website. And 2 hours later, it started off over 60% of Miami-Dade County residents don't approve of, CAVA's new bond proposal. 2 hours later, that article disappeared. And 4 hours later was replaced with another one that said many county residents approve of her new policy. Like, it just completely flipped the script on a lot of these things. Then just yesterday, I was running through a single reporter, all his articles on CAVA, just promotion, self-promotion. I mean, you can't pay for that kind of publicity. And they're complicit in this because that's all they're printing.
Yeah.
And, I mean, unfortunately, the media channels and a lot of the mainstream media have an agenda. You see who's donating to her, including the Herald. And it's out there. I just hope people are smart enough to see through it and call it out for what it is.
How are you getting your message out? I mean, obviously, you've got to be knocking on doors because that's really all that's left to Republican candidates, even when counties change.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you again for having me because it's, outlets like this that make it possible. But I am late to the race and late to the game on this. A lot of the candidates started months and months ago. They've raised a lot of money. I am getting out there. I'm going to community events, to different organizations, and, we've got a busy calendar doing that, just speaking to people to get that message out. and then through channels like yourself, that is making it possible.
Yeah. Now, the environment, and I don't know Miami-Dade as well. I live in Broward, and I spend most of my time in Broward and Palm Beach County. But the level of anti-Semitism that I've seen coming out of Miami-Dade recently, I mean, they just tore down an encampment at the University of Miami. Does that concern you? I mean, is that something that really needs to be addressed?
Absolutely. So one of the things that really, I'm going to say, people should be drawing everyone's attention to, not just the community, is the importance of maintaining a civilized society requires support for law enforcement. I mean, in our own Bible, when the Jews went to Israel, the first commandment God gave them was to set up judges and law enforcement, because without law enforcement, we cannot maintain a civilized society. We've seen what happens in some of the other states, like New York and California, when they don't support law enforcement. What happens? The anarchy that's followed. And this mayor is overtly, I mean, she bent the knee literally in support of liberal organizations like Black Lives Matter, which oppose law enforcement. So that doesn't send the right message within Miami-Dade County and to our law enforcement. But on the topic of anti-Semitism, which is obviously very personal, it upsets me greatly that our mayor doesn't take a hard stance. Even in response to actual hate crimes that occurred here in the county, over the last few years, we've had multiple
attacks,
media, and where we'll have press conferences. And her message, while we're all talking about the incidents or the importance of standing up to anti-Semitism, her message is always diluted, with the talks of inclusion, tolerance, LGBTQ, the Black community, and no offense to everybody else, but, especially in a post-October 7th world, the message of support for the Jewish community here in Florida and for the state of Israel, it needs to be concise and it needs to be clear. It needs to be a clear message, and we're not getting that.
No. And interestingly enough, much like many other, I'm just going to say it, Democratic politicians who are Jewish, I mean, she is Jewish, they have held their tongues and allowed this administration to take positions that are anti-Semitic. That they're not anti-Israel; they're anti-Semitic positions, and I find that outrageous. I think she is one of those politicians, much like Debbie Wasserman Schultz and Lois Frankel. They keep their mouths shut. At least my congressman, Jared Moskowitz, I may not agree with him on anything, but he stands up for against anti-Semitism in a vigorous manner. I don't understand why she doesn't.
I don't, throughout our history and our biblical history, too, we've always been our worst enemy. Yes. And sometimes, we see that coming from our own people, which is surprising, especially on the federal level. Mm-hmm. We're lucky or fortunate to have our Congresswoman, who, again, is a Democrat, but Congresswoman Frederica Wilson, has been overtly supportive of Israel, which is something that we need to see within the party, because this shouldn't be a party issue. Right. Israel is not only one of the biggest allies of the United States, but it is the only ally out there. It supplies intelligence, military intelligence, hardware. I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship. Forget, take the whole Jewish community out of it. The Israel-American relationship is symbiotic. We both gain from each other, and we're each other's allies, and there needs to be that support. And comparing, I mean, to see them put out a warrant on the government that's trying to actively defend itself. I mean, this wasn't an attack and then they went away. They're continuously bombing Israel and shooting missiles into civilian territories. And Israel is actively defending itself, and to go ahead and group them in with terrorists is disgusting.
Yeah. It is. It's disgusting, and it is hard for people like me who grew up in New York, grew up in families that were ardent, yellow dog Democrats, to see what happened to the Democrat Party. I mean, I left that party over 30 years ago because it just became so. First of all, I think it's racist. I think it's anti-Semitic. I think it's anti a lot of things I believe in, anti-law enforcement, anti-military, and yet it stayed pretty strong in Dade until the last couple of years. So, look, I'm thinking you guys, all the Republicans running, have a pretty decent chance. Come back on the show and let me know how your campaign is going. How can people get more information?
Absolutely. So they can go to my website, www.voteshlomo.com. That's SHLOMO, voteshlomo.com. And
right.
I've got a ton of information out there. We're continuously updating it, so just keep an eye out.
All right. Well, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. Good luck.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate that.
All right. So let me take a final break before we wrap up this program.